going. And I don't think anybody sets out to destroy things. I mean, some people do, of course. There's always psychopaths out there who love seeing things destroyed. I mean, the kids who love destroying your Lego houses, right? Instead of smashing them into bits. So there's always people who like that. But I think that's a minority in the sort of the innovation space. I think most innovators, you can't really be an innovator if you're a pessimist, because you have to see things can get better, right? You can't innovate if you think things are always going to get worse, right? So you have to look at things from a not from a destructive light, but from a creative light.
That's beautiful, I think. Disruption, the creative power of destruction. Is it really? Startups take great pleasure in flaunting their revolutionary spirit of attack and dream of shattering old systems in disruptive ways, while established businesses shiver at the thought of being surprised and rattled to their core, worrying that if they miss the latest disruptive trend, they will become obsolete and become the next Kodak or Nokia. So everyone in the tech and innovation business is constantly on the hunt for disruption. But what does it really mean? And is it really the end-all, be-all we should aim for? Very welcome to Code Red, Technology, Madness, and the Future of Humanity, the monthly podcast for people who are pissed off about technology going rogue, want to do something about it, and wish to use technology in a positive way to create a better future for humanity. My name is Ursula Yasin. I'm the CEO of Vienna-based Red Swan, and I'm co-hosting this podcast with tech luminary, futurist, innovator, inventor, writer, and experienced product manager with Ideate and Execute, Chris Kalaboukis. Chris is named inventor on 323 patents, imagine that, and he's cited on even more. He's cited on 1,691 patents in the internet, social networking, and fintech space. A serial entrepreneur, he has helmed several startups from interception to launch. He has authored several books on innovation and the future and publishes blogs and podcasts at thinkfuture.com. His latest innovation is AIdaily.us, a platform which helps you to navigate through the fast-paced AI jungle with a well-curated daily blast of AI news. If you're interested, check it out. It's free of charge, AIdaily.us. But now, very welcome, Chris. I cannot even tell you how happy I am that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Ursula. That was the best introduction ever. I'm going to record that and use that myself, by the way. It was fantastic.
I can send it to you afterwards.
I'm like, I don't realize I'm not really that amazing, am I? No, I'm not.
You're absolutely deserved. So,
thank you.
Yes, I'm amazed too. I mean, so many patents. How did it even come to that?
Well, I'm just an idea generating machine. I know you read, I forget the author, but somebody was mentioning you should just sit down and generate ideas a day, like a number of ideas a day, 10 ideas a day, 20 ideas a day, whatever. Whenever I see an issue, whenever I see a problem, whenever I see anything sort of across my life, I just sort of create an idea against it. And when I was working for these organizations, I worked at Yahoo, I worked at Wells Fargo, I worked at a number of different companies. There was always something wrong. Right?
Yes.
There was always something that needed to be solved. And the problem is that we have this issue with the way things are. I mean, status quo, everybody loves to keep things the way they are. So when it comes to new product development, it's very difficult to create new products that will actually become real because everybody's okay with the way things are now, right? Everyone hates disruption. Everyone hates things to change. They just like leaving things the way they are. So if you have all of these ideas, you can't really build them because the product development organizations are pushing back against building them. Oh, we have too many of this, or it'd be great if we could do that, but we can't because we have all this tech debt, etc. So what do? The idea's got to go somewhere, so it can go into the patent pipeline. So instead of turning it into a product, even though ideally it should be a product, it can go into the patent pipeline and you can save the idea for later. It's kind of like putting it on pause so that later on, if you want to use it, you can use it. So I think you get something like a 25-year lifespan. So you can come up with an idea in 2005 and go, we can't really build this now, but let's just put it on hold with a patent so that maybe sometime in the next 25 years, when the technology gets to the point or your tech debt lowers to the point where the product development group can actually do something about it, they can just go to the library and say, hey, that's a great idea. Let's pull that back out. And because we still own the patent to it, then we can turn it into something at this point. So it's almost like putting an idea on hold. I mean, it costs a little bit of money, but it's much cheaper than actually building a product and getting it out the door.
That's actually fantastic. So you are a real disruptor, which brings us to our topic today. To disrupt means to tear apart, to divide, or to destroy. Sounds brutal? It is. It's about creating something new through destruction. So, how about you, Chris? You created a lot of businesses. Did you ever destroy other businesses in order to create your own business?
No, never. And you know why? Because it is extremely difficult to destroy anything that's already out there. It's kind of like people say about taxes, right? Once a tax comes in place, it never goes away. It never lowers. It just keeps going up. So whenever a system's been put in place, whenever something new is built and is out there, it's extremely difficult for it to be knocked down because there's so many forces keeping it up. And it's not technology forces. Technology forces disrupt all the time because you could bring a new technology in and it could completely replace an older technology and it would be just fine. It's the humans behind it. So the society behind it, the culture behind it, the people behind it are all so vested into what they've already built that it's extremely difficult to tear it down and replace it with something new. That's why almost all the time, whenever you see anything like this happen, it's always some large organization sort of buying a smaller company and then just sort of sucking it in and then destroying it, right? Because it can't really destroy it on its own. It has to be part of the company. So I've seen this happen at Yahoo many times where they see a competitor and they just want to take their technology. So they suck it up and then they destroy it.
Yes.
But actually destroying a company or tearing something down or doing the disruption, it's extremely difficult because there's just so many hands trying to keep things the way they are. And nobody likes change. Everybody hates change. And whenever and disruption is the worst kind of change because it's like a negative change, right?
Yes. Nobody likes change and nobody likes uncertainty, and yet life is very uncertain. And disruptions, of course, also create more uncertainty. The idea of disruption traces back to my fellow Austrian political economist and former federal finance minister, Joseph Schumpeter, who wrote in 1911, traditional business models, products, technologies, services, and entire industries and markets are to be destroyed, upended, and revolutionized. A disruptive innovation is supposed to completely displace the old. Since this famous postulate, the creative power of destruction fascinates people in the technology world as much as in business. But what many fail to notice, most of the time, as you mentioned, the creative power lies not in the destruction, but in creating something new. Typical examples of genuine disruption actually illustrate that quite well. I think the inventor of the automobile was not primarily concerned with demolishing carriages, and streaming services do not count destroying other sound carriers among their core activities. These new technologies have solved customer needs in a completely new and convincing way, and thus pushed existing systems out of the market along the way. So I think great innovators don't destruct, they create new solutions instead. What do you think, Chris?
No, you're absolutely right. Disruption is a side effect.
Mm.
basically. It's, for example, look at something like Uber. Uber is extremely disruptive, if you ask me, because there was a system in place that was so fixed and stolid, and nothing would get around it. And then Uber just came in and replaced it. I mean, they didn't look at destroying the taxi industry or destroying the travel industry or destroying the food delivery industry. They just said, we're going to create something that's better, that can serve our customers better, and not at the same time allow individuals who have cars to make some extra money. So they created a marketplace that fit into a space where there was an industry that was sitting around and being very, very complacent. And they didn't go in there to try and destroy the taxi industry. They went in there to create something new and better and more useful for its customers. And the disruption sort of occurred as their reaction to the industry. And the beautiful thing about it is, because this competition occurred, the taxi industry itself had to change, had to move to compete with with Uber. So the beautiful thing is that when you come into these industries and disrupt them in some way, it really, if you think about it, from the consumer's perspective, it's not disruption. From the
Mm.
consumer's perspective, it's like, oh, great, I have another choice. I have a choice that's better. It's these old industries that consider it as a disruption and realize, oh my God, we got to do something about it now. Otherwise, we're going to lose everything. And it's the same with banking. It's the same with education. It's the same with all these sort of traditional industries that have been around for a really long time. Love doing it the way it's been always been done, because they don't see how it can change. And in fact, they have a vested interest in keeping everything exactly the same. And then when a neobank comes along, or an online course vendor comes along and basically overturns them, disrupts their business, that's when they have to step up and go, oh, wait a minute, we got to do something better because we're losing our customers.
Yeah. So sometimes it is indeed necessary to tear down walls in order to create something completely new, new systems. And real inventions can, of course, render existing structures fragile. But I still prefer to build things, not to break them down.
Well,
Uh,
and that's how it is. I think people, these entrepreneurs are not trying to break anything down. They're trying to create something new. They're seeing a pain point that
mm,
exists today
mm,
and going, I need to solve this pain point. And if something were to happen to the original industry that is keeping it, if it were to collapse, then that's a side effect. It's not what they're trying to do. It's just
mm.
what happens based on what they're trying to do.
Another fun fact for me is that when companies and existing systems call for disruption, they want disruption, but in an orderly manner. Funding agencies, investors, and established companies are clamoring for disruption, but want it to be served up in a safe, orderly fashion. That is a contradiction in terms, I think. As an expert evaluator for the European Commission, my job is to track down promising, high risk, disruptive innovations. Sounds like an existing task, but it has absurd obstacles. Because, because one of the first questions I have to answer is there already a willingness to pay for the proposed service or product? I even dare to say that the invention of the automobile would not have made it to the next round in a European funding scheme. Just
Hmm.
imagine the pitch interview with Carl Benz, for instance, going like this. And I'm now reading from my written column. Imagine this: Mr. Benz, before we support the development of your automobile, we would like to know how many people would actually buy it. Have you ever sold a single unit of it? No. Well, how much experience do you have in the automotive business? Nothing either. We must say you are not the first one to try something like this either. Yes, 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 let's be honest, Mr. Benz. One component of your invention, the wheel, dates back to 4000 before Christ. So your idea isn't that new anymore. But come on, give us a 2-minute elevator pitch on why someone would prefer your automobile to a carriage. Convince us. Wouldn't that be just preposterous?
Impossible. And nobody, it would never get anywhere.
I
It would
think
never get
so.
anywhere had they not pushed it, had just pushed ahead and done it.
I think that he would never have made it through any funding scheme. Nobody would
Yeah.
have given him money.
Yeah. And that's how it is with most innovations, if you ask me, is that it's kind of like you've got to just push ahead and do it, right? If you step back and think, should I do this? Is there a market for this? Can I do this? Then it never goes anywhere. You just have to go ahead and try it. I mean, it's kind of like the lean startup methodology, right? It's like the sooner you can get something out the door, the sooner you can get an MVP, even if it looks terrible, as long as it solves the problem and you can get some traction, then you realize like I said, that's a side disruption is a side effect of that. But there's no way to know if something's going to be successful unless you get it out the door and try it. Yeah. Right? That's the only way that you know. So of course they would never get funding for anything like that. In fact, most of these innovations don't get funding, and unless you've got your enterprising entrepreneur just going out there and doing it at the least possible cost, the lowest possible cost, and getting into the marketplace and actually seeing traction. That's the only way that these things can actually happen.
I think you have an advantage for that in the US, because in Europe we have another great thing. It's called regulation. That's how
we have a lot of that too.
I'm not sure if we talk about the same level of that. So we are very good in preventing entrepreneurs from doing exactly the thing you just described, I must say. Because if you have regulation hindering you to do it and just try it, it's really very, very hard.
Well, I mean, that actually happened. If you go back to my Uber discussion earlier, is that there's plenty of times where Uber just went into a city. They didn't ask anybody. They didn't do anything. They just launched within that city, and they got tons of pushback. I know that happened in Athens, because I went to Athens once, and there was Uber. All of a sudden, it was there, right? And I used it, and I'm like, well, this is great. I don't have to hail a cab. I don't have to worry about trusting a cabbie, etc. And then the second time I went, maybe about 2 or 3 years later, it was gone. And I'm like, what happened? Well, regulation came in and said, well, you can't have Uber there. So for a certain small period of time, Uber was there, and people were using Uber, and they were going, wow, this is so much better than the cabs. So what ended up happening is that the public pressure pushed against the regulation and said, you know what? We really need to use Uber. So what they ended up doing is working with the cab companies and using Uber as a front end so that you can call a person or a cab. So it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where we push things to the extreme to see how far they can go, to see how far we can disrupt. And then if we can't go all that way, then we'll meet somewhere in the middle, and it becomes a negotiation point. So doing that, pushing against the envelope as far as you can actually show you maybe where the limits are, and then you maybe have to backtrack to something that's more useful.
Yeah, if it's possible to backtrack.
They won't let you backtrack in the EU.
Well, in any case, I think if we want disruption, we must also be very clear about what that means and be willing to take the risks, as you described. And we're not so good about that in Europe, I think. But we have to be clear that destruction is not served in a tidy manner. If you order a wrecking ball, you have to expect walls to be torn down. I think startups have an easier time of it because they haven't built up so many walls yet. And I also think the first thing established companies should tear down are short and medium-term management goals and benchmarks standing in the way of innovation in general and disruption in particular. Because I think that's really one of the main things that hinders innovation. What do you think about that?
Oh, you're absolutely right. But the thing is that that's the holy grail of these organizations. They can't think outside the short-term window box. Right. And I recall doing an ideation session with one of my clients, financial services company, where I said, we're going to sit down and we're going to think 10 years out. And then after we think 10 years out, we're going to backtrack to today so that we can figure out what our strategic plan is for next year. And they're like, really? I've never thought that far out. It's like, I can't even imagine what the world's going to be like that far out. And I'm like, well, we need to do that. need to start we
Yes.
need to start, look up from our like month or quarter or year long planning and go, we need to figure out where we're going to be in the long term, and then work backwards to today, not look from where we're at now, because that's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of innovation or disruption, because everything's just incremental.
Yes.
And we can take what we have
Yes.
today, and we can just
Mm.
add this and add this and add this and add this and add this, and then you have a Jenga of foundations that you pull one block out and everything collapses. But if you start with a stronger foundation, if you start with where we're going to be in the longer period of time, work backwards, then
Mm.
you get a much better picture of where you want to go as opposed to where you are now. Because where you want to go and where you are now, there's a huge gap there. And a lot of times the companies themselves don't realize it. The customer gets it. They can totally see that gap. They go, wait a minute, this is my need and this is what you can provide. I see a huge gap here. But from our perspective, the company's perspective, they don't see a gap, or they see a gap smaller.
Mm. Or they see it when it's too late.
Yeah, exactly.
When they
By
have
the
to.
time the customers jump to another organization,
Exactly.
one of their
Yes,
competitors.
that's right. I love that we get the same answers. It's really like we do these future scenarios and we think 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And even main infrastructure providers tell us, you know what, we never think like 10 years ahead. Well, you should. You should. I mean, you build infrastructure. Don't you think that
Yeah,
it would be a good thing to think ahead? And I also think we imagine the future because it opens the box. Everyone says, think out of the box, think out of the box. Yeah. But they always try to think out of the box in the now and in 1 year ahead. But they already know what happens 1 year ahead because they have their benchmarks. They have to meet the
yeah,
benchmarks. And it's also, they cannot change it there. And also, I think then they feel a lot of powerlessness because they say, well, we can't decide anything here. And that's a very sad thing because that's a main point of human agency. You
yeah,
decide thousands of things, thousands of little things every single day. And if
yeah.
a company says, well, actually, we don't decide, it's also not true. So,
Exactly. And then, for example, one of my more recent clients, they said, we want to do something with AI, but we're not going to do anything with AI unless there's a solid business case behind it. And I'm like,
that's
so you can see where this is going, right? It's like,
same.
but you mean you don't want to experiment? You don't want to try
Yeah.
things out of the blue? You don't want
Mm.
to try things that have no return
Mm.
just to see what happens, to see if a return comes down in the future? I mean, look at something like Twitter. Twitter would not
Mm.
exist if it weren't for, you know what, let's just give it a shot. Let's
Mm.
try it. Let's
And
put it
just
out
do
there.
it. Mm.
We have no idea if it's going to be useful. We have no idea if anybody's going to use it. We have no idea how we're going to make money with it. But look at it today, right? So in 2000, in fact, I was one of the very first users of Twitter, and I was experimenting with a couple of other Twitter folks. I'm like, well, what do we use this for? Can we use it for email? Can we use it for that? Oh, it's
Mm.
too short for email. It's like we just, and that was the beautiful thing about it, is that they didn't know how
Yeah.
to monetize it, and eventually the monetization
Mm.
came out of it. So if you start with what's the business model, you're already restricting yourself into a tiny little box, saying we got to make sure we make money with this before we even do anything about it.
Mm.
And if you ask me, that's not innovative. That's not disruptive. That's just like, okay, well, you're just being incremental. You're just
That's right.
saying,
And also, I think maybe that's also a decision you can make. Disruption means radical change. If you want disruption, you have to be ready to do that. But if you are not ready for that in yourself and in your organization, you are probably better off dealing with incremental innovation.
mhm,
That's fine. I think developing markets, enhancing technologies, and improving processes instead of disrupting them can also create great innovative solutions. It doesn't always have to be disruptive, but then don't use this word so inflationary all the time. It's like,
yeah,
no, we want disruption. Okay, yeah, but we don't want to take any risk.
yeah.
Okay.
But within every organization, there has to be a set of individuals that are working on the disruption, are working
That's
on
a
the
good
next
idea.
thing.
Yeah.
Because if
Hmm.
you're not doing it, your competitors are doing it, right? Somebody else out there is coming up with the next thing for finance, the next thing for education, the next thing for whatever you're doing. And if you don't have at least some people within your own organization also looking at that. And even if you have to fund it, even if it's a loss leader, even if it's not making any money, you have to experiment in that space. You have to kind of know what you're doing in that space. Because, like I said, if you're not doing it, one of your competitors is definitely doing it.
That's right. And then it really hits you by surprise.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about disruption and destruction. Chris, how can we use technology in constructive, not in destructive ways? How can we use technology to create new beneficial things which empower people?
Well, I think that comes back to our original conversation where I don't think anybody really wants to destroy things. In fact, that's my moniker, is the optimistic futurist. I don't think about negative futures. I only think about positive futures. I think when you look at every startup founder, when you look at every business owner, nobody really wants to destroy anything. I mean, they see things that are not going well and they want to replace them with something better, but they don't set out to destroy things. So I think most people look at things from an optimistic viewpoint. They go like, here's a problem I need to solve, and I'll figure out a solution for the problem, and the solution itself is an optimistic solution because it solves an issue. It makes people happier, makes things better, improves the experience, improves efficiencies, etc. Whatever it does is also better. So the disruption is a side effect. Nobody's trying to tear anything down other than they're hoping that it just goes away by itself because I've come up with something better, right? And I mean, I think people are all very, very happy when there's competition, because when there's more than one choice, then they feel empowered to go a better way, right? So nobody's trying to take down the banks. Nobody's trying to take down the colleges. Nobody's trying to take these things down. They're just trying to build a better version that people can then have the choice to go to, right? So if I go to a college online and get my degree through them, then the other college, I could just as easily choose to go in person to an old line traditional college. So having all of these options out there, I think are where things are going. And I don't think anybody sets out to destroy things. I mean, some people do, of course. There's always psychopaths out there who love seeing things destroyed. I mean, the kids who love destroying your Lego houses, right? Instead of smashing them into bits. So there's always people who like that. But I think that's a minority in the sort of the innovation space. I think most innovators, you can't really be an innovator if you're a pessimist, because you have to see things can get better, right? You can't innovate if you think things are always going to get worse, right? So you have to look at things from a not from a destructive light, but from a creative light.
That's beautiful. I think
that's why I don't like these futurists who are there's so many futurists out there as well who are very negative. They're like, we're going to lose 4 million jobs. Autonomous vehicles are going to kill 4 million jobs. And I'm like, yes, they're going to kill 4 million jobs, but they're also going to create 16 million more. So it's like you can easily look at almost anything and go, there's always an upside. It's the same with any major technological breakthrough that we've had. When we're on this side of it, we always look at it and go, oh my God, look at all the jobs that are lost. But then when we're on the other side of it, looking back, we go, wow, look at how many jobs were created. I mean, if I were to go back to 1990 and say, you're going to be a web developer, people are going to be like, what? Is that something to do with spiders? They're like, no. Huge industries were created by technology that we're not even aware of. So we just have to have faith that these things are going to happen.
Yes. Great innovators don't destruct. They focus on creating new solutions instead. So thank you very much, Chris. Let us know what you think in the comments, our dear audience. And thank you for listening to or watching Code Red, Technology Madness and the Future of Humanity. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. Do you know 3 people who would also enjoy the content? Then share it with them. All episodes are publicly available and free of charge. You are more a reader than a listener? Feel free to subscribe to the written Code Red columns on codered.redswan.substack.com. In any case, let me thank you for taking the time and bravery to change the world by starting with yourself. Wherever you are, I wish you a good day or a good night, and in any case, a good life. See you next time.